Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody. It's really all very challenging. And I have to say, it's hard to follow those three previous discussions. But then I'm lucky I'm before George. So I guess I feel so small. You know, you're all talking about such a big world. And I'm just going to talk about myself. So, but myself, I guess, I have to say I'm a product of the time, of the technology, of the systems I created. I don't have really any ideas outside of those tools that I use. And actually, the tools I use end up forming my musical ideas. I don't really have preconceived musical ideas. So I just have to make sure I create a very... how to say, I have to make sure that whatever platform I create will carry me somewhere. So I call it patterns of attraction. Every time I have to give a talk, it gives me a chance to kind of make a story about myself and try to see. And I'm getting old enough that I'm actually starting to look at patterns the same way I'm doing with machine learning and trying to see what are those, is there actually a path through 50 years. So I'm going to talk, it's not all about AI, but I think it has some kind of a direct continuation on how I started and how created specific desires and specific attractions, and how it brought me to eventually work with AI, but in such a different way from what I've learned before that I'm actually a bit confused at this point. Did I not think about anything? So anyway, the disruptive gesture, because it has always been through the gesture. I mean, not always, but once I created a gesture controller, and I just going to focus on two, it was really about how to allow the body to disrupt somehow the more conceptual or intellectual approach to what I thought I had to do. And the body always had an interesting way to kind of disrupt somehow this intention. And this disruption is actually, like we've seen in different talks, somehow the disruptions or the failures or the error often ends up being breaches to creativity and ideas. So just to get back a little, when I started in 78, it was all analog systems, mostly. I mean, I didn't do much computer, like I was mentioning earlier, the hub or those people, even though they were in the same center I was. But the reason I'm showing that as my teacher, Eliane Rading, my first teacher, and it was really this kind of like this connection and relationship to instrument, this kind of somehow a love affair or a hate affair, but definitely some kind of like tensions between the instrument and the instrument also having its personality. Each of those synthesizers have very, very different sound, and they all have this kind of demands. And I think this idea of the material world creating demands and shaping how you're thinking and how you're approaching has been, I think, very determining in how I proceed. And I'm just thinking about this now, 50 years later. Oh, this is what happened. You know, was like the kind of formative years that maybe I could just keep on trying to, like a child, keep on trying to rediscover. So I just have to say, as some of you know, my last studies was the Mills Center for Contemporary Music, and which is now defunct, unfortunately bought by a university, which eradicated the music department. So I have to mention that because so many people have been affected by this. So then when computers came about and I was trying to figure out how to perform, and I wasn't thinking big ideas about, again, gesture control or wearables or anything like that, but I was trying to do something that looked a little better than the Mattel glove. I thought the Mattel glove is definitely not sexy, and I was like, I'm going to be sexy, and so it was a joke, but actually, like all jokes, and I find out actually all the things that I do out of fun end up having much more weight than the things that I do out of research. And so often those little funny things kind of stick, for years. And so anyway, this is the different ladies' glove, and you have the number 4 here, and which I have to say, it was very interesting to see it in a glass box, because I felt really sad. I felt like I had abandoned it. It was kind of like a bird or something. I was like, maybe I have to save it. Maybe I have to break the glass and take it, and free it. So there's definitely a very interesting relationship with the instrument. Again, this idea of like the instrument is just part of you. So it went through different things, and number 4 and number 5 were built by Bert Bongers and sponsored by Stein Institute. And as you saw, Michel Weisler is next to the glove, which was really nice because they sponsored the 4 and 5. So this is 5. That's sewn on my hand, actually by Bert. And I don't have to show you a video because there's a video next to the glass box. But after 25 years of using this instrument, I was thinking I have to really rethink. I felt somehow trapped, not trapped, but my imagination was just completely tied to the lady's glove. I could only think of performances, compositions, sound design. Everything was tied to the gestures that I could do. So what if I was to do other gestures? I could then do other sounds. So for instance, they're like sounds like, sounds that you cannot really think of as gestures, like stable sounds. I could not really do that because I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be standing there. I'm going to let the sound go and not do anything. So there was like this kind of route. Somehow there was some kind of this landscape that was defined by the gestures. So I thought, I'm getting good at it too, and other people were doing it, and their gloves looked really ugly. And I thought, I'm not gonna, deal with like ugly gloves. I'm just better. The wearable industry, corporate industry was also getting very interested in this idea. So I was like, okay, it's time to go. And also, but aside from that, I think there was really this idea about, I had learned from the glove, is that the most interesting things were things that were not in my control. They were the leakages. They were like the things that, obviously everything I would program, like it was all Max MSP programming, but it was like you program your intentions, in the sense of like this finger does this, if this does that, and you have this kind of intensive map of relationship from these 30 sensors coming in. But there was so you say, oh, the index is going to do that. But when you bend the index, somehow your little fingers moves a little. And often what happens, even though I programmed, obviously, if that happens, this is what would happen in the music. But it turned out often those little leakages were the ones that would actually bring me somewhere, That was like what I thought I was going to do. And then these accidents would start, driving me. So from that point, I was kind of really thinking I have to think about another instrument that would take advantages somehow of these leakages. And I had met this, as some of you might know, Rebecca Fiebring, who had created Wekinator. And because I had done some machine learning with David Wessel, who some of you might know. In the 90s, we were interested in the gesture recognition from the glove, but it was too intensive. I couldn't tour with it. You had to have the silicon graphics. You had to have like all this intense kind of programming, and also at that point was still Max and not MSP, so I couldn't really take advantage of this morphing. So you could have like, yeah, this is this sound, this is this sound. But what happens in between, which is actually what's interesting, I could not really do that because there was no live synthesis. So anyway, I thought, okay, I'm going to build an instrument that would take advantage of this Wakinator, which I thought, yeah, that's actually really good. And mapping, which is really how I approach machine learning, was simply from a point of mapping, how to deal with massive amount of data and map it to sound synthesis. That was really the only thing I was kind of thinking, because otherwise before it was this very intricate web of connections that would just be so, difficult to undo for the next performance, next composition. So the mapping in Wakinator, and now I often also use another one called Rapid Max, or there's Flucoma. There's really allowed for a much more flexible connectivity, which is really how I approached machine learning. So I tried several things. The first was a frame that looked ridiculous, very art school. And then there was whatever. Anyway, it turns out with the shape that you saw, for you who were there last night, that's what I ended up using. And the idea was to actually, it was inspired a bit by Stein had an instrument called the web. And I think it's called the web. And I love this, again, this idea of interconnectivity. You're trying to control this, but actually this is what's happening. And then you go, oh, this is interesting. And then you go there. So anyway, that's the shape and the springs, And so this is a bit how it works. And I would like to propose I really kind of bothered recently, it was like feature extraction, mining. It's why do we have all these terms? It's very strange. Can we just call maybe feature recognition? I recognize this as valuable, and this is what I'm going to use to guide my system. I don't know if it's used, maybe it's used feature recognition, do you know? Instead of extraction, do you know? Is it? It's always extraction, isn't it? Computation, yeah. Huh? Oh, is it? Oh, good. No, I don't like extraction. Yeah. I thought I was inventing recognition. I'm not. Oh, okay. Oh, well. Anyway, so the idea is that there's a more complex signal than the 30 sensors I had on the glove, which were all DC voltage. And so the 3 audio signal and the feature recognition, let's say, is done in MaxMSP. So I'm extracting 18 features out of these audio signals, and then it's going through the mapping, machine learning, where I have a lot of models that are being moved, and that's originally it was in Wakinator, great piece of software for people like me who don't know too much about this, machine learning thing, and then it goes into synthesis, and I have here the father of my synthesis, Miller Puckett. I've lived with Pap for the last 20 years. I'm dying to have him change it, but he doesn't seem interested in it. So I don't know. I think it's the best synthesis, is the nicest synthesis I found. It's round, it has an analog sound, it's very flexible, and it doesn't break, which is what I really needed for this kind of chaotic system. I needed something that would kind of not freak out, like models. Models, you have to stay within a certain range because they break. But in this case, I can send totally, crazy values. It's probably totally normalized inside what, the patch, but it feels like I can send everything. So this is how it works pretty much. And I just want to go in this kind of working with this. What I found interesting with machine learning is that this idea of index of predictability, and the composition is used that I perform with have layers of what I call predictability. And by predictability, I mean that the terrain that it has, that it is moving through is, for instance, a very narrow terrain, meaning when I train the system, I might give it boundaries very close to each other. So the modulation of the springs, or whatever sensor is using, is just moving through this very close world. So the changes will be very delicate. If I train the system with a very large boundaries, then it's kind of like moving through this terrain, and it's just somehow the synthesis is just trying to get to those points. And that's when I get really interesting sounds, because then when I hear it, maybe you saw yesterday, I lock it. And when I lock it, I can just go in it and then just kind of start digging in it. So in a way, the machine learning, aside from the fact that I use it for mapping, I really use it for sound design and sound. I'm dying to hear sounds I have never heard. I don't think it's possible. Maybe it is. I think that the ear, I think I've heard a lot, but probably what I'm having trouble with is still creating layers of sound, layers of change, layers of depth, you know. And so in a way, this kind of sound design through ML has been really useful, aside from, again, allowing me to just in performance move through, you know, a lot of models which become the composition, you know, the way I move through models. And in a way, this kind of like terrain also makes me think a lot about David Wessel. He had this idea, he had so many ideas that were, you know, so precursive of where we are. But he definitely was into this idea of timbral space. I don't know if any of you knew him, but it was really moving from, like, you know, the drum to the horn. You know, it was just something he was really into. So it's a bit different here, but still it's this idea of creating terrains where you can have this kind of like morphing in a way of synthesis between, do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, makes sense. So anyway, that's what it is. And the idea of meeting the instrument at the boundaries, I think that, again, is this idea in the boundaries and the limits. And I think we brushed on this in different ways through these different lectures. But it's like, how do you settle with a system, and how do you play it to the edge, do you know? Because you can always add more buttons. You can always add more sensors. You can always buy more modular, you know, synths. You can always, like, you know, there's no end nowadays to this gluttony like we saw of like stuff, you know. But it's how do you kind of like stay with, you choose, this is 3 colors, this is 5 colors, and this is what I'm going to try to use, you know, because it's really, we live in a time of, we think there's no price in adding. But actually there is, and actually there's really also the price of, like, maybe that's what one of the speakers said, it's like, actually, you just don't know anymore how to navigate. So I found that with the glove, or even with Spring Spyre, sometimes I'm dying, I'm gonna just add, you know, 5 more buttons, you know. But I was like, no, just stick with what you got, you know, just stay with it, and that's it. Try to cheat, I do cheat. But so that's it. And then recently, last year, I was actually Rebecca again, who knew I'm always looking for new sounds and new. She said, check rave. It's IRCAM. I think it's François Gaillon. I don't know his first name is François. François? Huh? François. Anyway, she said, check rave. You know, I think you'll hear sounds. Well, I did not. But it was interesting. So I thought, I'm going to train it on my voice, because I'll have like, you know, a mini me, and it's going to talk exactly like me, and it's going to be fun. Well, if you heard it last night, it's just a disaster. It's like talks, like it has a speech problem, or it does things that are totally not, you know, my voice. But then I thought, oh, this is great. All the failures turned out to be the most interesting part of AI. And then I thought, well, of course, no, it's not going to do anything new. It's only going to do what it's trained. It's trained on my voice, 3 hours of my voice, millions of iteration. It took 3 weeks, and it came out with this kind of weird, funny garble. And I was like, well, you know, that's what you trained it. What you expect, you know. So my issues has been with, like, my issues has been with the fact that you only get what you trained it with, and you think, well, I'm going to train it so that it's going to have a little brass, and it's going to have my voice, and it's going to have this and that. Maybe I don't know how to use it, but it has not done anything surprising. It's just trying to live within this confinement. So that's why I say it's a failed dysfunctional narcissist. It's not even doing a good narcissist, you know. It's like doing kind of like a messed up narcissist. At least, you know, at least know that that's what you're going to do. So, you know, some of you probably are going to say, well, you don't know how to use it, but I still think that it's going to do what you taught it to do. And we are so much into control. We're so much into having a system do what we want it to do, or like in those music thing that we've seen, you know, there's like these rules that are so limiting, and then it makes music that's very limiting. And we get satisfied because, yeah, I made it. But I think the big issue is going to be how to maybe implement errors in the system so that you can dial in, like mess up, so that hopefully you can get surprised. You can say, I want it to be 90% wrong, you know, and maybe you'll get something. And I think also it's like, why do we want to do things that our world? I said, train the system on, you know, different languages, train the system on, you know, climate. I'm not train the system with things that you just don't really understand, so that hopefully you'll get to hear sounds that you've never heard. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laetitia. And while we reset for George, are there any questions for Laetitia? No?
Everybody's digesting.
Digesting, yeah. Oh, no, there's one over here. One over here.
Yeah.
One there.
May I just quickly say thank you for stating this at the very end, that basically quite obvious thing, but if you say it, I think it sounds great to say that AI model is doing what it is optimized for, what the loss function was optimized for. And very often we hear critique of these very large general AI models for not delivering the great quality of outputs. But, you know, it's, as you said, if you have a group of people that considers certain musical style great, they can train their own specialist function. So I found this part very relevant.
Thank you.
Over here.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for your really tremendous presentation at the opening. What it has in common maybe with a much more ancient synthetic, maybe also slightly computerized instrument is indeed sounds that we never heard. Ondes Martenot.
Ah, oui.
Has it been inspired by this, which is maybe a one-dimensional spire?
No, I didn't think of the Ondes Martenot, but I should have. I was thinking about circles, so maybe it's a French thing. I don't know. It's in the blood. I did not, but I think that, you know, those images stay with you, and you get, again, attracted and you don't know, but maybe that's what it was. I think that I did not think of the Ondes Martenot, but I was definitely thinking about how to simplify. It doesn't maybe look simple. I mean, maybe it is not simple, but it looks simple. And I think there was a simplicity in the sound of the Ondes Martenot, you know, which I was maybe longing for without knowing. Yes. Even though my sounds have nothing to do with it, but, you know.
There were three, at least three extracts from the which
Yeah.
is already in the instrument,
Yeah.
which interfere with each other. And
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Yeah, I was inspired actually, like I said, also the web that, and then That's Time had made, and Sensor Band was a band that used, you know. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I realized as I talked to you, I forgot to play the voice, how messed up it is. But that's okay. As I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, I forgot to play my messed up voice. But yeah, no, thank you for mentioning it. I should think about the connections. Yeah.